Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. Episode 81. This is a fall classic. This is Haunted Houses. And I am your host, Eric Lee, and today I am joined by
Liz Williams. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Liz. So, unfortunately, Mike can't join us. He's got a bit of a family situation. Mike, we wish you the very best, and we hope that we can get you on very soon, but you take care of what you need to take care of. So, anyways.
Absolutely. Haunted houses. Eric, are you a haunted house goer during Halloween season?
I used to be when I was younger, but you know, I kind of got tired of just sort of the notion of the jump scare kind of a thing. I've done a couple of haunted tours, you know, like I know there's a classic one here in Portland, which is the Portland tunnels, and you know they're full of like scary stories, but you know the actual haunted houses, no sightings. But my dad claims to have seen a ghost. I think he was doing. My father's a research biologist, and so I think that they were out in Eastern Oregon in I think it might have been Bend. I forget what. It
might have been Bigfoot.
Well, if it was Bigfoot, it was inside the lodge. And it was, but he said that it was just you know, when they talk about sort of the classic, you know, floating sheet kind of a thing, he said it was kind of an indistinct image. And I said,
cool.
It was like, did it have a reputation? He goes, I don't think so. It's one of those funny things now, and unfortunately, my father, his memory isn't as great as it used to be. But this is one of those things where I should probably go back and actually see if I can pick his memory about that. But it was, you know, and he's a man of science, right? So
right.
It was
so
very
to admit
strange.
The unexplained must be really something unexplained. Yeah. So funny you should mention that, because in the CNN Traveler magazine, just a couple weeks ago, they put out their top 8 haunted cities in America, and both Portland and New Orleans are in the top 8. Really? So talking from 2 of the most haunted cities in America.
I think there's something that the romantic notion of New Orleans with the raised graveyards and the you've got so many of those beautiful old French mansard colonial buildings that are your classic haunted house looks, right?
And when you walk in the French Quarter a lot and you see, so for anybody who hasn't been in the French Quarter, there are balconies on almost every building. So they hang the for sale signs and for rent signs from the balconies. So the sign will be above the door where you're for sale or for rent. And a lot of them will say haunted or not haunted. So for some people, I guess they want a haunted house. So
that's so cool.
It's a selling feature down here.
Yeah, and actually, ironically, it'll actually be part of our next podcast. But there's and I'll make mention of it when we get to that one. But the whole notion of it's a tourist attraction. That. Certainly, when the Overlook Film Festival, which is held down in New Orleans, as you all know, the Bourbon Orleans.
It's our most haunted building.
Yeah, and it is. I did when you talk about have you done a haunted tour? That was one of them that they did the graveyard tour in New Orleans, and also there was it's kind of like a live performance art kind of a thing where they would do a seance in one of the in the most haunted hotel room, and the actors would do things, and it was actually kind of fun because she would be working the one of the actresses would be doing the Ouija board, and then someone would sneak up behind you and whisper something in your ear and make you jump.
That's scary.
And you go, oh my God, what was that? And and we were supposed to hold our cool, but I
wouldn't be able to.
Turned into a little schoolgirl. It was amazing. But have you actually? Now, do you do haunted tours?
No. Oh, I've done some of the tours. I don't do haunted houses, and we have like a huge one here that was called the House of Shock. That was Phil Anselmo from Pantera used to put it on, and it was one of those like practically sign the waiver before you go in kind of haunted houses. So that's not my kind of thing. But we also have, and I've never done it, but it's on my list, the Myrtles Plantation, which is outside of the city, probably about an hour and a half, is like one of the most haunted places in America. And that's where people I know have gone there and said they've definitely had experiences. They may not have seen ghosts, but they've, woken up at times where then the people say, oh yeah, that's the time that this happened. And so I want to go out there. Maybe at the next Overlook. Yep.
Yeah, I did. I think one of the most famous ones that I've done is the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, which is an amazing feat of bizarro architecture. And so now that I think about it, I mean, it was a terrible movie, but it's a great haunted house.
Right.
Although, because that one is purported to be haunted by the ghosts of all the people who died at the hands of the Winchester rifle,
right?
Which was the fortune that crazy Mrs. Winchester, she felt the need to commune and apologize and ward off spirits, and so that house was filled with doors that opened into walls and staircases that went nowhere and rooms that had no doors on them. And,
it's so cool to actually see it.
And it's a beautiful house, but it's a monster. It's a really big, and that's one of those things where they advertise it down the freeway. And I was all tugging on my mom's sleeve. It's like, Mom, I want to go see this. It's like, that is a tourist trap. And it's like, I don't care. I want to see it.
Who cares? I'm a tourist. Yeah, I want to go. I would totally go if I was out that way.
Plus, if you've ever been to San Jose, it's a boring town. I mean, it is.
Sorry, fans from San Jose.
Yeah. No, the people in San Jose know this. For entertainment, you go to the city. You go to San Francisco, right?
Awesome.
But San Jose is it's a very rich community. It just doesn't have a whole lot in the way of cool, fun things. But the Winchester Mystery House is probably the best thing they've got down there. So,
that's cool.
For this episode, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say probably the same thing you were going to say. So for this one, I kept with haunted houses and took it literally that the house has to be haunted. It can't be a person who's haunted who just happens to live in the house.
Okay.
It has to be the actual house. So if you left the house, you would escape the haunting. Did you have any kind of similar themes or anything running through your choices?
Yeah, and this actually stems a little bit from, I think at one point Mike and I were going to try and do a live podcast from my architecture office, for which my colleagues were very excited for, but Mike he was out in the field and wasn't able to do it, so we missed our Halloween opportunity. And so I focused mine on on the actual building itself and what buildings as characters, because in haunted house movies, the building has got to be a lot of the best part of it, right?
Right.
And so I picked some that have either some authenticity to it, or they're great buildings, and whether the filmmakers were able to play them off as the scary part, as opposed to, because I know that Mike and I had done very early on in our podcasting a discussion about ghost movies. So it's a different. They're very, very close cousins. But
they are.
And I wanted it. Yeah, I think like you, I wanted the house to be the star.
Right. The house has got to be haunted by something, so you're gonna probably get a ghost.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between someone being in the house and they're haunted versus everybody who comes into the house,
right?
Family after family, experiences haunting. So, but kick off from there.
Are all of yours sort of ghostly haunts, or are there any like demonic possession houses, or which?
I'm running the gambit from ghosts to demons to
oh, cool.
Colonists from the 1800s.
Oh,
so
I can't wait to hear this.
Yep. I'm running. I got a whole group.
So
but
why don't you go ahead? You want to lead off?
We're going to do our
I'm sorry.
foursome. I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
I'll kick it off. So I'm starting one with a super gateway, because this one the kids can watch too.
Okay.
And this is Tim Burton's 1988 haunted house classic, Beetlejuice.
Yay!
So
almost did
in
this
one.
Yeah.
Well, we have Barbara and Adam Maitland, who are played by Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, and they are in their Connecticut country home that they are fixing up, and they're into rustic charm and country style. And they're coming back from town where they were getting, supplies. I think it was like paint, and Adam was getting miniatures for this tiny version of the town he's building in their house. And they swerve to hit a dog when they're driving home, and they drive off a bridge into the river. Mm-hmm. So when they return home, they don't know they're dead, but when they try to leave their house, they're outside in a desert of these crazy Tim Burton character sandworms.
Yes.
So they realize something is not right. They did not return from their trip.
Those are great sandworms, like black and white striped.
The sandworms
they look like
are awesome.
sockworms.
Like black and white striped, crazy looking worms. So, most people have seen Beetlejuice, but just to recap, so as Barbara and Adam realize, the handbook for the recently deceased appears in their attic. And as they're going to the other side to learn what they need to do as ghosts, their real estate agent, Jane, sells their house to a family from New York City, the Dietzes. And the Dietzes are played by Catherine O'Hara as Delia, Jeffrey Jones as Charles, and Winona Ryder plays their goth daughter, Lydia.
They're all fantastic.
They're all the best.
It's a fantastic, the cast, everybody hits exactly the right notes.
Yes. And Catherine O'Hara as Delia is like an art lover. She's very cosmopolitan and contemporary from the city. So she brings her friend and decorator, Otho, and they are ripping this poor, beautiful, old Connecticut farmhouse apart in order to turn it into almost like a Manhattan loft kind of looking house. Luckily, her husband saves Adam's office, which is the one room he wants to leave that has the tiny town that's in the attic. So as the Dietzes realize they're in the house, they're ripping it up, the Maitlands want them to leave. So these are our ghosts who are about to start haunting their house. And they do all the old tricks. They have sheets that they cut holes in and, spooky noises. But they can't seem to get the Dietzes out. So in the tiny town that he's building is a graveyard. And all of a sudden they see this little kind of person in it. And it's Michael Keaton playing this undead kind of court jester type character named Beetlejuice. And if you say his name 3 times, he comes to life. So they enlist the help, quote unquote, of Beetlejuice to get the Dietzes out of their house. Hilarity, Harry Belafonte, dinner party sing-alongs, and kind of an exorcism ensue. So Beetlejuice is my pick, and it is a great, fun, haunted house that the kids can enjoy too.
Yeah, I think this really showed off Tim Burton's flair. I mean, it was. Yeah. It had a bit of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in its sort of the forced perspective, angular fun house kind of house, and the fact that Catherine O'Hara decided to change everything in the house to the way that she wanted it, and sort of the wrestling with the changes, and letting Michael Keaton just go crazy.
Do Michael Keaton. He goes all out. He is turned up to 11 in this one. And I just love that this is the house. That's what they're fighting over. Like the Maitlands want them out because they love their house and the way it was, and it's country, Connecticut farmhouse vibe. And the Dietzes come in and, Delia was practically dragged out of Manhattan. And so she wants to turn it into this, Manhattan city place that it's really forced to try to be that way. When you see her rooms, they do not go at all. Mm-hmm. So that's why I just love it as a haunted house. They're really fighting over this house.
I just saw this, I think it was showing on TNT before Halloween. And so it's like if Beetlejuice is on, I'm stopping and I'm watching it.
It's so fun. Yeah, exactly.
And, the fact that there would be, you'd open a door and you didn't know what was going to be behind it. I mean, that's part of the, the just the wild imagination of Tim Burton. I think his first big feature was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and then this was his next one.
Right.
And it cemented his sort of this dark whimsy that plays in all of his movies. But Beetlejuice is that's the one that set his standard. And Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin were great. It's weird to think because you look at Alec Baldwin and he looks like he's so young.
I know. It is. I mean, 1988 was a while ago. Yep. We don't want to admit it, but it sure was.
So, I picked another gateway film, Good for the Kiddies. And this one was released last year. This is The House with a Clock in Its Walls.
Yes,
directed by Eli Roth. And I was like,
yep, Eli Roth does kids work.
Yeah, that Eli Roth. It's like Hostel comes to kids. Actually, it is actually remarkably restrained for Eli. It is a really funny movie. There's a lot of times where you laugh out loud because the cast is fantastic. It's you have Uncle Jonathan Barnevelt, who's Jack Black, is a warlock, and Florence Zimmerman, Kate Blanchett. It's like, you got Kate Blanchett in a kid's horror movie, which is fantastic. And then there's a little boy, Louis Barnevelt, who plays, who's the character is Louis Barnevelt, played by Owen Vaccaro. And so those are your main leads. And the story goes that after his parents are killed in a car crash, 10-year-old Louis moves to live with his Uncle Jonathan, and all he has left from his parents is a magic 8-ball they'd given him. And this is in sort of 1940s Michigan, although I think that this was filmed in Atlanta. It still looks like Atlanta, but all right. But when he arrives, he's overwhelmed by this big creepy house, and all of these, there's like hundreds of clocks on the walls, and there's a suit of armor, and there's this lazy boy chair that's animated. It's kind of like the house dog, and it sort of follows them around the house. It's done practically, which is very cool. And so it has a lot of depth and texture to it. Anyway, so that the Florence Zimmerman, the Kate Blanchett character, makes one of the great film entrances where she steps out of a grandfather clock. And starts complaining about sort of the various watch mechanisms. And as it turns out, Jonathan and Florence have taken over custody of this old mansion and are looking for a mechanism there's a clock in the walls, and it's driven them so crazy that they've decided to line the walls with clocks to try and drown it out, but it doesn't really help much. And eventually Lewis learns that they are a witch and warlock, and then he gets enlisted into helping out with this hunt for the clock in the walls. And he's also given one explicit instruction, which is don't open that creepy cabinet. And
so guess what's going to happen?
Yeah. It's like you set that one up, and of course it's a little boy he's an oddball, eccentric kid, and he's trying to make friends. And there's this sort of this turncoaty little boy who is running for office and for class president, and so he befriends young Lewis. But then once he wins, he turns his back on him, and it's like he is the best friend shunned, and he has no other friends in the school. And so he tries to impress him with dark magic, and so he, of course, does the thing that he is not supposed to. Oh, and the other thing that happens is that Lewis is initially concerned that Uncle Jonathan is creepy because because Uncle Jonathan is walking around the house late at night with an axe, chopping in the walls, trying to find the clocks.
He's trying to find that clock.
And as it turns out, he gets visitations from the spirit of his mother, or what he thinks is the spirit of his mother, telling him to go get that book. And eventually he takes her bad advice and falls to peer pressure and does something he shouldn't, and accelerates some very dark secrets. And to say more would be to spoil it, but what I can say is that I love the house. It is apparently it's a big Victorian home that was the part of the Coca-Cola, the son and heir of the first Coca-Cola magnate.
Cool.
Had that house built for himself in 1925. And
yeah,
it was a big,
so that's definitely Atlanta.
Yeah, it is Atlanta. And they had I think he ran it as sort of his own party pad for 40 years, and then it became a discotheque in the 70s. And then after the disco era faded away, it became this abandoned mansion. And there have been other films that have been done in this building. I'm not sure what they were. This was part of the extra features if you watch the DVD. And Eli Roth was saying that right after they finished filming this, it turned into a bed and breakfast. So if you happen to be traveling through Atlanta, for those of you, our southern listeners, and if you happen to be going to the Fright Fest or the Buried Alive Film Festival, in Atlanta, maybe you want to check out a bed and breakfast over at the house where they did the House with the Clock in the Walls, which would be cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's a good choice.
It's called the Candler Mansion, and it was built in 1921. Creepiest thing in the movie. Now this is a gateway movie. It's PG, but I thought it was. I think Eli Roth knows how to still elicit spooks for little kids. I think little kids will still get spooked without it. Actually, there's no violence in it really. But there is a moment where Uncle Jonathan gets turned into a baby, where it's a baby with Jack Black's head on it. It is.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Really creepy. So it earns its I think apparently everybody on the cast. It was actually an animatronic doll that they had done a face cast of Jack Black and attached it to this robot baby, and it would squirm and wiggle around and pee. And
oh my gosh.
And everybody it's like when everybody on set was afraid to touch it, Eli Roth knew that he had something going. So
yep. That's hilarious.
It's perfectly played by Jack Black and Cate Blanchett, and I'm so happy that Cate Blanchett's doing a movie like this. It was in a way it's kind of Harry Potter-ish. I think if you were trying to understand sort of the level of creepiness about it, but it is definitely going straight for traditional Halloween spooky. And so, I think back to back, and it actually feels a lot like Beetlejuice, right? I think that was, I almost went Beetlejuice, and then I decided to go with House on the Clock in the Wall. So I'm glad you did Beetlejuice.
Good choice.
That's my number 4.
Choice. Cool. All right, so my number 3 is hard to talk about without spoiling it, but this is a really cool and creepy movie. It's called The Pact, and it is from 2012, and it's directed by Nicholas McCarthy. It stars an actress named Katie Lotz, and it also stars Casper Van Dien of Starship Trooper fame.
Very handsome, very kind of.
He is very handsome, but not
actor.
He's not going to win at any Academy Awards.
No.
But okay, so this is. I really can't spoil it. So this is going to be a quick little plot summary. But it definitely fits haunted house. So this is about 2 sisters, Nicole and Annie. And it takes place in California. Nicole has gone back to the home that they grew up in because their mother has just passed away, and she's like preparing for the funeral. And Annie doesn't want to come to the funeral because their mom used to treat them horribly and like lock them in the closet and all this stuff. So Nicole's out there dealing with it by herself. And Nicole is on a video Skype with her daughter, who is staying with their cousin Liz, and their daughter Ava is probably about 7 or 8, when their video conference gets cut off. And then all of a sudden behind Nicole, this door opens and it's dark and she walks into the door. A few days later, Liz, the cousin, is calling Annie saying, hey, we haven't heard anything from your sister. What's going on? Like, I have her daughter, the funeral's in 2 days. You need to go out there. So Annie has to go out to the house where her sister has now disappeared and has bad memories of how she was raised, and go to her mother's funeral that she wasn't going to go to. So she heads out there and she goes to her mother's funeral, and her cousin Liz brings her niece with her, and they go, all 3 or 4 of them, the 2 adults and the little girl, go to stay at this house. And that night, Liz, the cousin, disappears. So now within the span of 3 days, Nicole, her sister, and her cousin Liz have both disappeared in the house that she grew up in, that she has like really bad memories of. And they've both been in this one room and then have disappeared. So Annie takes her niece, Eva, to the police station, where we have the officer played by Casper Van Dien. His name is Bill Creek. And he thinks that, like, okay, well, 2 people have gone missing and you're the only connection. So it's probably something having to do with you. And she's like, no, I'm not going back to this house. So she takes the cop back to the house, and like spooky stuff starts to happen. Like, there is supernatural stuff going on in the house, but they also start to notice that in the walls, there are like holes every, 10 or 20 feet. And then they find a room that had been boarded up that Annie doesn't remember from growing up in this house at all. She had no idea that the room was there. So I can't go further than that because
the house
the house is haunted by an actual supernatural spirit. And there are also rooms that she had no idea existed. And this is not a mansion. This is a suburban California home.
Okay.
So to say that, oh my gosh, in the middle, like, there was a room that they didn't know was even there, you know that something is definitely wrong in this house.
So it's capturing, or do we know? Okay, so I guess to say too much more would be to spoil the plot.
I can't say anything else. I cannot spoil the plot. So I hate to cut it off here, but so when this came out, I probably saw it in 2012 or 2013, I guess, whenever it was released on video. And I have thought about it ever since. And when we were doing this one, I was like, man, what was the name of that movie? And I was able to kind of Google what I know to be the ending to confirm that this was the name of it. And it's The Pact. It's from 2012. Okay. For streaming, you can rent it on like Amazon, but it's also, if you have a subscription to the IFC film channel, it's available to screen on that one for free, or if you have a subscription to that. It is The Pact. It is definitely worth it. It has got a pretty good twist, and it's really creepy and very fun.
So good that she can't tell you about it.
I can't spoil it. And it's 90 minutes long. It's an hour and a half of your life.
There you go.
Spent more time on worse things.
So this is now, is the house itself, you said it's a sort of a suburban house, so is it not inherently creepy?
No, it's not creepy at all. It is I don't know. You'd probably look at it and think this is 1,400 square foot, 1-story suburban rancher. Yeah. So the fact that there is a room, when they're showing at the beginning, you're kind of like, she's kind of running around the house. And you're like, that's weird. Like, why would you almost go in like a U shape? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't there be a hallway or something? So you can tell that something's not right. But hey, I mean, they had grown up in this house. They didn't. Why would you question that? Who knows?
It's the magic of Hollywood. You can build your own sets, and it doesn't have to match the outside of the house. It's very rare that you actually run into a project where the outside the exteriors match the interiors of the building in a haunted house thing, because they tend to it's Hollywood magic.
And this one's not really like an impossible space kind of situation. It's just you probably lost at least 200 square feet in there. What's this like big thing doing in the middle of the house where you don't know that there was a room in there?
That's
so
where the architect in me would say, okay, let me see the plans.
Exactly. Well, you do see the plans in this, so you'll get some more, and it's really, really worth checking out. I highly recommend it. I cannot say anything else because I don't want to spoil it. But
okay,
I love it. I think it's great.
So, to follow up on my assertion that the insides don't necessarily have to meet the insides don't have to meet the outsides. One of my all-time favorite haunted houses is one of the all-time greats, and that is The Shining. The Overlook, right? And it's funny actually. As much as important a movie as The Shining is, it's not. It hasn't come up a whole lot in our conversations. Mostly because we sort of assume that you guys have all seen it.
Right.
But this is, and again, because I'm assuming that folks know about this, you have Jack Nicholson playing Jack Torrance, and you've got Dan, his wife, or his son, Danny. And I am going to IMDb who Danny is here. I shamefully don't have that.
You got Shelley Duvall.
Well, yeah.
Playing the wife.
Yes.
I don't remember her name. I'm going to be honest with you, Eric. While I value The Shining and the set, I think this one came up on it was in the top 10 of our top 100.
Yeah.
And it's also on our speed round. This was my most overrated horror film.
Right. Well, the house itself is not. Okay, so Wendy Torrance is Shelley Duvall's character. Danny Lloyd plays Danny, and then you also have Scatman Crothers playing the black guy who dies first.
Yep.
So, but really, this is a story of an author driven mad by the building itself, which is haunted by the proverbial Indian burial ground, and he is it is really showing the psychosis overwhelming Jack, and he picks up the axe and he goes after his wife and kid. That's the super short microcosm version of The Shining. I'm sure you guys are aware of it, but the thing that I wanted to bring up was the power of how Stanley Kubrick utilized the buildings. The outside of the building is the Timberline Lodge, which is right near us in Portland, up on Mount Hood, and it's one of our great 1930s era work progress buildings built during the Great Depression, and it's still an active ski lodge. You can stay there. It's not haunted, but it is it's a beautiful, it's like they're the old school national park feeling big timber building, and but they only do they do the outside shot of it when you see Jack chasing Danny through the snow. That's at Timberline. The interiors, they used a combination. They used the Stanley Hotel in Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah. And it is I think they use that for the ballroom and I think some of the hallways. And the also in Yosemite Park, one of the great hotels in the world is the Ahwahnee Hotel, and that is where the famous bar sequence where Jack goes up and starts complaining about not being understood by his family, and when he starts talking with Lloyd, and Lloyd saying, "I think you should do something about this, sir." He's like, and then he just and that is sort of the beginning of the turn for Jack to go out and that his paranoia has gotten the best of him, and he's being encouraged by Lloyd in this fabulous and Stanley Kubrick, for as all his austere cold notions, knows how to frame a scene. And and between that and the the carpet, for which I have a T-shirt, the famous Overlook Hotel, sort of hexagonal pattern. They've even done a movie about the Overlook and the room specifically that was the hauntings are coming from.
237, right?
Yeah. And but there and the staircases and the elevator with the blood flowing out of it. It is it's a master technician taking full advantage of some absolutely amazing buildings. And I think if you try and make sense of matching insides to outside, you have a little bit of a difficulty, but still it's the majesty necessary to pitch the story, and the fact that they're just they're the caretakers during the winter, as they're the only ones there, and it's just this big empty hotel. I think similarly, I think movies like the Innkeepers, I think we talked about recently. Didn't want to bring up the Innkeepers again because we just talked about it.
Right.
But I do love the Overlook for the actual real buildings that they brought in, and it has. I have to admit, every time I drive up to go, every time I've done it like 3 times in the last decade, but to go skiing up at Timberline, you look at that thing and you go, you're just like, I should grab an axe and run around in the parking lot. Just to. Does
it have a hedge maze like it did in the movie?
It actually, here's the funny thing. Actually, the Stanley Hotel, the Timberline does not. But the Stanley Hotel actually had a commission out to get a hedge maze done, and me and 2 of my colleagues submitted a competition design to do a hedge maze for the Stanley Hotel. I still think that ours was better than the one that actually won.
That's awesome.
But the winning prize, I think that they had these little short shrubs, and it's like, that's not a maze. That's
my kind of maze, because I'm definitely afraid of being stuck in any kind of maze.
Right.
The only thing worse would be one made of corn.
It should be, it should be a bunch of cypress or arborvitae, some big, dense,
they have to be tall,
tall
imposing.
Shrubs. And these are knee-high shrubs. And it's like, nah. But apparently it was a liability thing. They didn't actually want a real maze. They wanted the suggestion of the maze because, again, like we were talking before, the Stanley Hotel wants to capitalize on its fame for being associated with The Shining. And so they went out and they said, let's do a hedge maze. So anyways, that's my number 3.
How far outside of Portland is it?
It's about a 2-hour drive.
Huh. All right.
I think when you come down to, if you actually, next time you're out in my neck of the woods and you do a podcast here at my house, if you look down Powell Boulevard, you'll be looking straight and you follow Powell Boulevard all the way out to Mount Hood. That's the Highway 26 goes out there.
All right. I'm going to add that to my list. All right. So I have to do something a little bit different here because my number 2 and number 1 choices are 2 seasons of the same television show.
I think I know what it is.
They are my favorite seasons of this television show. So I'm going to lump them together. So then, Eric, you're going to have to go 2 at a time.
Okay.
And I am doing American Horror Story season 1, which is Murder House, and season 6, which is Roanoke.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Not what I was thinking. I thought you were going to do Haunting of Hill House.
Nope. I've talked about that too much. So I'm doing a little bit different. So American Horror Story began in 2011 on FX. It's created by Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk. And it's I think they're on season 10 right now. And it's kind of turning out where they're saying they're all going to tie together as some sort of anthology. But the very first season was called Murder House. And it stars Connie Britton and Dylan McDermott as the Harmons. And after an affair, they leave the East Coast, Boston, for Los Angeles and buy this Victorian house that had been built in the 20s that they can't believe they're getting this insane deal on. The realtor does disclose that there had been a murder-suicide a few years before with the previous owners of the house, but that's all she's required to tell them is what happened in the past 3 years. So they also have a teenage daughter named Violet, played by, I never know how to say her name, Taissa Farmiga, I believe is sister of Vera
Taissa Farmiga. Yeah.
Yeah, Taissa Farmiga. So they move in and begin experiencing terrifying ghost situations. Turns out this house had been built in the 1920s by a doctor who struggling with a serious drug addiction to laudanum and not being able to really make money. His wife brings in girls who are quote unquote in trouble. So he begins performing abortions in the house. Uh-oh. And then kind of develops a Frankenstein complex and is like building creatures in the basement. Uh-oh. So this house, everybody who lives, and then of course they end up dead and their baby ends up dead in the house. Everybody who lives in this house meets a horrific end. Next, it's a group of nurses who are in the house, and they're all murdered by a serial killer, a la kind of Richard Speck. There's the gay couple who live in there who are the murder-suicide. And so now the Harmons are trying to sell this house. You know, that's not going to work. They have their creepy next-door neighbors, which is Constance, who's played by Jessica Lange, who is going to become a feature through almost every season of American Horror Story.
Yeah, and this is, I think, just to emphasize this is the perfect landing spot for, we'll say, seasoned actresses to still have starring roles and getting juicy parts. And the great thing is they get to change it every year. So they don't have to, I think it must be fun being part of the American Horror Story cast. Everybody's coming in and out. I think Dylan McDermott and Connie Britton, actually Dylan McDermott, I think did show up during one of their other ones. Connie Britton has not yet shown up in another season. But so Murder House was, in my opinion, by far the best season. In subsequent seasons, American Horror Story kind of went off the rails for me. In between them, you had like Hotel, which is one with Lady Gaga. You have Coven, which was filmed here in New Orleans. They have Asylum, which was season 2 that a lot of people loved. But then in 2016, season 6 came. And this was one of the most secretive seasons. They normally will announce months before it comes out, kind of posters, its subtitle. Right? Posters. They'll do suggestive things
that
make you kind of wonder
so you're
what it's
kind of figuring out what it is.
Yeah.
So season 6, they held it in until like a week before it came on, and it was called Roanoke. So, you know, it's like, what is that? Well, Roanoke Island is off the coast of North Carolina and is the scene of, in the 1580s, the entire colony of settlers disappeared. So that's what this island is. And season 6 is not a favorite of a lot of people, but I love it. I thought it was one of the most creative seasons in a show that was kind of drinking its own Kool-Aid and buying into its own crazy weirdness to the point where I was like, this just isn't fun anymore. So
was it
in this one? Go ahead.
I apologize. It seemed like Roanoke was taking cues. Was this before or after The Witch?
That is a good question. It is probably right in line with The Witch because it's 2016. So actually, I'm going to say it might be before. I'm going to look that up, though.
I'll do the IMDb-ing. You keep talking.
Yeah, IMDb. So this one, the way they set it up is that it starts out where the first part of it is being shown as like a documentary series that was called My Roanoke Nightmare, where you have a couple who are telling their story with this house, and they're showing their story being reenacted by Sarah Paulson and Cuba Gooding Jr. So it's like one of those shows you watch on TV, you know, like the Forensic Files or those kind of things. And they're a couple who leave California after an attack that leaves, it was like a gang attack where they walk down the street and just punch people in the face. They punched the husband and caused the wife to have a miscarriage. So they left and went back to where the husband's family was from, in North Carolina, and found this kind of like old abandoned colonial farmhouse. And so they're like, okay, we're going to have to buy this, fix it up. Mm-hmm. Well, this one is haunted AF because it is on the island where the scene or where this disappearance took place. Sure. You got cast of characters coming in from other seasons, including Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
So Kathy Bates plays a character called the Butcher, who, when you meet these colonists, she's absolutely horrible and absolutely terrifying. And so the second part of this season is done where after this My Roanoke Nightmare documentary went out, it went to like critical acclaim. So of course, the people who made it want to make money. So they want to bring back to the house the actual people who survived and left and the reenactment actors to show them there to kind of do a found footage of this thing. And then that's when the bodies start dropping. The body count is super. It's a really interesting setup, but I don't think it kind of maybe like resonated with a lot of people. But I thought this was like one of their most creative seasons, and it is bloody and it is scary. And so for anybody who's got time, I think they're only 10 episodes each. Only, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're not like seasons where it's years and years of stuff that you're going to have to watch. They're 10 episodes each. They're standalones. You don't have to watch any of the other seasons. And these two, to me, are the best. And they're both super duper haunted houses where these are not just little spirits. These are all demonic entities in both of the houses.
Cool. All right. Now, so, at some point, I'm going to have to get on the AHJ train. I did, what was the carnival one? Yeah.
I think it might have just been called Circus. I made it about halfway through that one and dropped out. I've done that for a couple seasons. I watched Coven because it was filmed here. But some of the other ones, I've just kind of said, it's getting a little too cuckoo for its own good.
They had, there was a suitably creepy clown. And then there was like the two-headed woman, and there were some interesting things. A freak show, I think that's what they called that one.
Yeah, freak show. You're right. That's what it was.
But it didn't do enough to sustain my interest. So I'll have to get back to one of these other ones. I do hear that the '84 one. I have some friends who really love the new one because it's really sort of Camp Crystal Lake.
I haven't caught that one yet. I'm going to have to wait for streaming. And so you asked about this in relation to The Witch. The Witch was 2015.
Yep.
But The Witch was New England, but kind of the same vibe, kind of the same time.
Colonial,
colonial, Puritan, that kind of thing like that.
Witches and, I don't think there wasn't any burning at the stake in The Witch or anything like that. But that was sort of the era of the puritanical purge kind of thing. Very interesting. So
and in Roanoke, you get, in addition to kind of regulars of American Horror Story at that time, which is like Lily Rabe and Sarah Paulson and Dennis O'Hare and Evan Peters, you get Kathy Bates, you get Cuba Gooding Jr., you get Angela Bassett.
I was going to say, was Angela Bassett, on.
Yeah, Angela Bassett. I think that was the first season that she did. Taissa Farmiga. So you have the whole group coming in and out. But it's just a super creative way to do the season that I really liked kind of rebooting. Because the one before it was Hotel, which was the Lady Gaga, which was also a haunted house. It was a haunted hotel in LA. Kind of more gothy, vampire-ish. So those are my two. That's my number one and number two. They're kind of interchangeable. I don't know which one I like better.
All right. But well, I am going to go with, for my number two, I'm going to pick out my favorite haunted house as a trap movie.
Okay.
So this is 2001's 13 Ghosts.
I like this one.
I know. This is a guilty pleasure movie because
agreed.
the acting is not good. despite having a couple of fairly decent actors, you have F. Murray Abraham and Tony Shalhoub, who are ordinarily very good actors, but put in service of a pretty lame-o plot. But at the same time, it looks so good. It is a so this is again a 2001 film where there is a ghost hunter, Cyrus. Kritikos, I guess is how you say his name. That's F. Murray Abraham. He's a ghost hunter, and so the movie opens where he and his assistant Matthew Lillard, who's playing, I think, Dennis, are trying to capture a very powerful ghost called the Juggernaut, who's a real big dude with hammers for hands, and the mission goes badly, and most of the team gets killed, but they do capture the Juggernaut, and then you flash forward to the Cyrus's son, Arthur, who is Tony Shalhoub, and he's apparently inherited his father's house, and or his nephew or his uncle's house. Sorry, not a father.
Right.
And they arrive, and it is for those of you who know your architecture, there's a famous house by Philip Johnson called the Glass House, and it's, you can see all the way through it, and it was, the whole notion was like, well, how do you go to the bathroom in this, well, there's
right.
it is a house of shifting glass and planes. It's like a gigantic puzzle box, like the Hellraiser box as a house.
Yeah.
And it also happens to be containing 12 ghosts. That Cyrus has captured these ghosts and has imprisoned them with these runes on the glass, and they're wandering through there and trying to puzzle their way, literally, around the house. It's just even hard to figure out where it's like. It's like a hall of mirrors, right? And and the walls that would be there at one moment aren't at another time, and one by one the ghosts start getting that these portals or these protective runes start breaking down. Some stupid decisions by the cast. One of the reasons why it's not the greatest plot is that this is a classic movie of people making real idiot decisions, but. These ghosts, they have, I think one of my favorite things about this movie is that the costumes and the makeup effects are great. And they have, so that there's like the names of the ghosts. You get the withered lover, the torn prince, the angry princess, the pilgrimess, the great child, the dire mother, the hammer, the jackal, the juggernaut, which was caught earlier, the firstborn son, the torso, and the great child. And they all show up, and they all have these fantastic looking costumes. If you go online, you can see some of these images, but it is a fun, it's bloody. I mean, there's a moment where a glass plane comes down and slides and cuts somebody in half, and just the classic kind of things, like they're still kind of like breathing, and then you see the body sort of fall apart half and half. Things don't really happen that way. Glass panes tend not to be that sharp. You'd still probably get killed and crushed, but it's like, Hollywood theatrics.
Yeah, you're not going to be cleanly cut in half.
No, and this is the other thing is that you have to wear these special glasses. So there's a lot of this, tons of jump scares where the cast puts on spectral glasses, and then all of a sudden, boo! There's looking through a window, and all of a sudden they show up, and then it turns out that the ghosts start abducting some of the characters, and then the rest of the surviving people in the house, that they're trapped in the house, and they have to do a ritual. And it turns out some of the ghosts are good, and some of the ghosts are really, really bad. But it is less about the story. I mean, the story doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, to be honest. If I read through it, just reading through the Wikipedia, it's like, what I remember. I don't remember much about the plot. What I remember about is the cool house. It is
exactly the house, how it looked, and I think that The way that this film looked, because what was this, like 2000?
2001.
Something around there, 2001. When they did Cabin in the Woods, kind of that, when they showed how all the different spirits were and everything, all the different scaries, how they were kind of set up, it reminded me they were definitely influenced by this remake of 13 Ghosts.
Yeah, in a way that it was sort of this is definitely a killing by numbers kind of a thing. It's, though it's not all teenagers, there's a bunch of teenagers, and then there's a bunch of kind of sort of the sly sort of, I guess now it's funny, like 10 years later, the kind of comments it seems to be, they tried to make a bunch of hip references and that kind of stuff,
right?
And and to be honest, Matthew Lillard drives me crazy in every single movie he's in. He's in a lot at that time.
This was like his Lillard time.
Yeah, and well, actually, up in Portland, Lillard time means something completely different.
Yeah,
there's our star basketball player is Damian Lillard, and he refers to Lillard time or Dame time. Anyways, that's a bit on a little slightly off topic. But the 13th ghost is that the Cyrus is from beyond the grave, has been trying to abduct the children, the children of Arthur. So I guess his or his great nephew, great niece. And so that would force Arthur to become a 13th ghost and activating a gigantic machine that's going to be this apocalyptic thing. It's just, again, the plot doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But you watch it for, and it's the very violent and you get the sexy naked ghost, and you get the big brutal dude with these like railroad irons in his head. I mean, they're just fun to look at. It's just great makeup. Right. So, the house has a personality in that way. And so that's my number 2.
Good choice. Have you ever seen the 1960s version of this? I don't know if it's a direct remake or just kind of taking the same idea.
It took this. It's the less. This one. It's a different animal. I think it took the idea of. I think they were still trying to do. There was a house that was haunted. That there was a ghost hunter who was trying. The basic parts of the formula. I think were still in place, but it was not a glass house, and it didn't have these wild and crazy looking ghosts that you would see with the spectral glasses and that kind of a thing.
Cool.
It was a haunted house movie of a gentler period, right?
Yeah.
The other one that I selected also more for the house itself than for the actual quality of the movie. But this is the 2015 Guillermo del Toro movie Crimson Peak. And this one is, I think it is more of it's definitely a haunted house movie. I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror movie. It's horror adjacent, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a love story. It's a story where, it's a period piece drama. It feels very kind of, they're like a Bronte take on a ghost story with lots of petticoats and top hats and aristocrats and almost Dickensian also. I think but it has Guillermo del Toro's flair, and it has his sense of his creative direction, which is always something to behold. It
really is a pretty looking movie.
Yeah. So I think Mia Wasilowska is your lead here, and she's a young woman who's, in sort of this woke era. She is the ambitious and intelligent young woman who has been overlooked because she's a woman, right? In like 1901, I think is when this movie takes place, and Tom Hiddleston plays a wealthy baron who comes in from England, and he's very Hiddleston-y, right? He is the embodiment of sort of this uh, androgynously handsome and aristocratic and exotic young suitor, and she's all swoony for him, and he seems to be apparently interested in her as well. But her father senses he's something of he's an American tycoon, and he doesn't trust this aristocrat with this, his proposal. He's apparently tried to be tried to hustle money from other countries, and he's been unsuccessful. Now he's trying America, and this guy and her father sniffs out him as a rat. It's like, you're up to no good. You're trying to woo my daughter to get my money.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that he gets murdered. The father gets murdered, and she gets whisked away to England, handy enough, and goes to this big mansion called Allendale Hall, which also is called Crimson Peak because the clay around the building is bright red. Handily, the water around it, or the water that's extracted from it, runs like blood. So it has very strong imagery with that. But the house itself is some of the most incredible interior sets that you will ever see, and I think to the point where I think the architectural design community has actually paid attention to it. I think it should have, in that year, been up for best artistic direction and best production design. On technical merits, this thing is a hell of a show.
Yeah, it is really cool to look at.
And I think later on they reward Del Toro with Shape of Water, which also, his when you get a budget that to back him up like this, because I think Del Toro was coming off of Pacific Rim, which was a big budget CGI kind of a movie, and it was reasonably successful, so they were willing to give him a big chunk of money, unlike some of his early movies like Kronos or Pan's Labyrinth, which were on fairly tight budgets but showed a lot of artistic. What you give a man like that some artistic freedom, and what do you get? It was a impressive presentation. Anyway, I'm sorry. I kind of led our listeners astray a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I also think Crimson Peak, when it came out, I mean, I remember going to see it, and I think it was marketed much more as a horror movie than it ended up being. Yeah. So it was kind of like, wah, wah, like that's not what we were here for, that kind of thing. So I don't know how great it did.
It didn't do great in the theaters.
Yeah.
Because there is a ghost who has a direct relationship to Thomas, who is Tom Hiddleston's character, and I'm forgetting to mention Jessica Chastain also plays a large role as Thomas's sister, Lucille, and they have a very dark secret that they are holding on to involving their mother and what happened to her. And the mother is haunting the house and pops up in cadaverous ways to visit upon Edith, who is the Mia Wasikowska's character. And once you sort of puzzle it together, that there is a nefarious scheme that Thomas and Lucille are up to. Thomas eventually, when I said that they whisked Edith away, he married her. And so she's going, and because he was smitten, and so the question on and off through this movie is, did he do it for love or money? It's a classic kind of a romancy thing, and did he do it to that his plan to try and to extract wealth from the clay that's around to get the iron out of the soil around the house? So that's sort of the background, and at the same time, what happened to Mother and why is she a ghost? That's the basics of it. But what becomes the overwhelming thing is that this is the wandering around this impressive house that was designed I guess the Thomas Sanders was the production designer, and I should give him a shout out because he was the production designer for Saving Private Ryan and for Dracula, the Bram Stoker's Dracula. So,
that's similar.
And Braveheart, right? So he's been in some of the biggest productions. So, someone like Guillermo del Toro can attract some of the very best in the business. And I thought this was some of the most, this is the best looking haunted house I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And you could look up Google the images and you'll see what I mean. Everything looks sort of dark and ornate, but sinister, and at the same time, it's like jaw dropping kind of stuff. I really enjoyed the set design for this. Not so much the story.
I agree. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a terrible story. No, it's horror adjacent, but it looks better than the story is. Yeah, but that's okay sometimes.
I think it's a 3-star movie. I think it was. Yeah. It was well acted. I think that the plot was solid. It just wasn't particularly scary, and it's kind of a slow mover. It's
right.
So if of these movies, I think the one that I had the most fun with is House with the Clock in the Walls.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
All right. So summarize.
Recap. Summarize. Let's see. I started with Tim Burton's 1988 classic Beetlejuice. Then did 2012's The Pact that was directed by Nicholas McCarthy, and definitely seek that out because I couldn't say much without spoiling it. Mm-hmm. And then rounded it out with 2 seasons of American Horror Story, which was created by Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk. Season 1, Murder House, and season 6, Roanoke.
And I started out with 2018's The House with a Clock in Its Walls, directed by Eli Roth. Followed it up with one of the classics, 1980's The Shining, directed by the Stanley Kubrick. And then slummed it a little bit with the 2001 gory Killing by the Numbers with a Fantastic Glass House, 13 Ghosts, directed by Steve Beck. And then lastly went with the sumptuous and gorgeous-looking Crimson Peak from 2015, directed by Guillermo del Toro. So, Liz,
good choices.
Do you have any grave digging that you want to partake in?
A little piece of exciting news that the Overlook announced that they're coming back to New Orleans, and it will be May 28th through 31st in 2020. So that's the weekend after the Memorial Day holiday. And I'm, of course, excited because having one of the best film festivals in a place you don't have to fly to is very convenient. I am wondering where they're going to put it.
That was going to be my big question for you because for those of you who haven't attended in years past, they used to have a Cineplex in the what was the name of the mall down there on the waterfront? Canal
Place Shopping Theater, and about 3 days before the 2019 Overlook, the Canal Place movie theaters shut down. I guess they graciously allowed the Overlook to run their film festival there, but there was no concessions, no theater personnel. Everybody who was at the theater was Overlook staff and volunteers, and maybe a very small skeleton crew. Mm. And they only let them use one side in the mall. The theaters are split into 2 sides. There's about 4 screens on one side and 3 on the other. So they just stayed in one section. And then, of course, Le Petit Theater in the middle of the French Quarter is kind of where all the spotlight films are. And that's a proper repertory theater. But so for the movie theater piece, I'm wondering where they're going to put it.
Do you think they're going to move it out of the quarter?
Well, I'm wondering, there is a theater complex that is in Mid-City, which is where I live, and it's called the Broad Theater, and it, I think, has 5 screens, and it's wonderful. It's got nice comfy seats and 2 bars, and it is kind of right behind the French Quarter, so it's probably a mile and a half from the French Quarter. It's a quick Uber or Lyft, or you could get on a bike and get there really easily, so it wouldn't be too far of a stretch,
Are
but
there many
I'm just
hotels out in that
hoping.
area?
No, not in Mid-City. You would stay in the quarter or in the CBD.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that for the ticket price, which is around $300 for an all-access pass, even on the early bird, that they don't do something where you're in, folding chairs in some kind of hotel space or something like that. That I can't sit in those kind of chairs for that long when you're doing a day.
We'll need to keep track of that before we get the full buy-in. We'll have to remind those folks.
That is 100% what I'm nervous about. But I'm glad they're coming back. I've got my fingers crossed that they're going to put it at the Broad Theater, which would be very convenient to me because we walk there. That's our kind of Sunday morning thing. We walk to the theater. It's like a mile away.
Although, if I recall, when Mike and I came down to visit you, it was overcast and 100 degrees.
It's hot. We won't be walking when it's the Overlook, but you could.
Okay. So on a similar vein, actually, it's like two great minds think alike. I am also bringing up a film festival, and this one's coming up real soon. This is the Buried Alive Film Fest in Atlanta, which I just mentioned. So I think you also might want to check out and see if you can get that the House of the Clock on the Wall place to get you in the mood for that. But this is a much, much cheaper festival. It's a different kind of an animal. It's starting on Wednesday, November the 13th, also known as This Wednesday, and it runs to the following Sunday. So this one, there's a lot more. It's short film heavy. They have, scrolling through their feature films. VFW is probably a big one that they've got coming through. I apologize. I didn't scroll all these things down. You could go to Buried Alive Film Festival schedule to take a look at what it is, but it's $12 per screening, so it's a lot less than Overlook.
It's a big difference.
And it's playing at the Seven Stages Theater on Euclid Avenue in Atlanta. They've been very good to us in the years last year with getting us screeners. I think One Cut of the Dead, I believe, played there last year, and a number of other really good films that we got a chance to peek at. So for our fans in the Atlanta area, highly encourage you to go down there. And I think they also do. They have like a local film director challenge where they do sort of Atlanta-based horror films. Take for amateur and starting out filmmakers. So if you get to see what your locals do, so check that out. Coming up this Wednesday.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Taglines were running short for some of the movies we picked, but I can bring us out with the tagline from Beetlejuice, and it's that he's guaranteed to put a little life in your afterlife.
Nice. I love Beetlejuice.
I do too. All right. I do too.
All right. Until next week.